Good morning, good afternoon, good late afternoon to some of you. My name is John Carroll. I'm the CEO and founder of the Service Council, and welcome to today's In-Service podcast segment. This one is really exciting and an interesting topic, the 5 Ps of service transformation, a blueprint for becoming the benchmark. You know, it's a really, really critical discussion for many organizations that are taking on a transformation, a continuum of transformation as they lead forward to the next era of service. Today's podcast will be 30 minutes plus or minus in length, and I'm joined by Emrah Ercan. Emrah is the VP of Services for North America for Hitachi Energy. Emrah, a really warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, John.
Outstanding. Before we get into our discussion, today's podcast will be recorded. So if you want to play it back, if you want to share it with colleagues, by all means, please visit your favorite podcast channel where you subscribe and get your podcasts. It'll be there. It's on our LinkedIn account. For those of you joining us from LinkedIn, hello, we see you. We welcome you to engage with us and submit comments, questions, reactions, which Emrah has been so kind to lean in on and welcome those. So without further ado, let me set up the topic and then we'll go ahead and jump in and get an introduction to Emrah. So, you know, people throw around the phrase best in class like it's a trophy. And Emrah and I were just in the green room here before going live talking about sports and trophies and championships and his Philadelphia teams versus our Boston teams. And his 76ers got the best of the Celtics, but I'm not sure if they'll get the trophy this year. I don't think there's that much confidence with some of the injuries there, but we'll see. Time will tell. But you know, the truth is, you know, best in class isn't a finish line. Just like digital transformation, there's no start and finish, right? It's not who gets there first. It's a discipline. It's a continuum. And this is the reason why we've seen people kind of reframe this whole concept of best practices as next practices, because it's not you achieve this finish line and you stop and you're okay, let's celebrate, right? It's what's next? What is the next thing? What is the next iteration? It's also what happens when a person, a team, or a company commits to standards that don't drift when things get difficult. You know, best in class is really being flashy. It's not about, you know, celebrating the wins and using it as a marketing, you know, technique. It's more about consistency. It's about clarity. It's about the willingness to obsess over details in your business that most people ignore. And that's why we framed today's discussion around the 5 Ps, which we're going to get into. The 5 Ps being the 5 pillars of service and transformation. And maybe the biggest misconception is that best in class means perfect, because it doesn't, frankly. The path there is usually messy. It's full of iteration, humility, uncomfortable feedback, leadership changes, regime changes, personnel changes. And what separates great from everyone else is their relationship with improvement, right? So you don't accept status quo, you aim to break it, you aim to improve it and refine it. So the real question isn't really, are we best? It's more of, are we building habits? Are we building systems? Are we building a culture that make excellence or best in class achievement inevitable over time? Because, you know, best in class is not just that title that you claim, that trophy that you accept. It's more of a reputation that other people place at your feet. So I wanted to set the conversation with just a little bit of a talk track here. Our research has signaled some of the metric achievements that best in class are realizing, and we'll kind of pepper those into today's discussion. But why don't we turn to our guest here today? I'm so pleased to be joined by Emrah Ercan. Emrah, welcome back to the discussion. We know and love you. You've been an advisory board member at 2 pit stops in your career. Could you please introduce yourself, both your career, what led you up to your current role, and what is your current role at Hitachi Energy?
Well, thank you, John. I think piggybacking on the sports and your reflection, in Philly, we say trust the process, right? The process is the transformation. I think that is my the thread of my the career up to this point. I'm new to the power industries. I'm a chemical engineer. I moved through the industrial the spaces, the life sciences, industrial automation, and now energy. And I think the different industries always the same underlying question: how can we remain relevant and continue to transform ourselves to service our clients? Today, I'm leading the service business units for Hitachi Energy North America. We are serving the utilities, the data centers, and the large industrial customers. And in my the current role, I am in charge of our the North America. Hitachi Energy owns the world's largest transmission and distribution equipment in the world, and yet only a small share of this very critical infrastructure is under the service agreement. So from that perspective, the grid really depends on our the lifecycle solutions and services to stay alive, to fuel the economy, our society, and civilization.
Outstanding, outstanding. Thank you for that overview, and you've made an impact to our organization and our community along the pathway of being a board member here. You'll be joining us actually with your colleague who leads HR for your organization, Kirsty Lafries. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. Apologies, Kirsty. But we'll be talking about the relationship between HR and services, right? So there's a real important relationship there, and we haven't done that in the history of the symposium. So I'm really excited to have you serve as a keynote at our Smarter Services Symposium. Shameless plug, mark your calendars, September 14th through the 16th in Chicago. Once again, hope you can join us. So you've inherited this business, right? And you stepped into a service organization with a bold ambition. You wanted to become the benchmark in the industry. Before we get into the how, what did you inherit, and what does becoming a benchmark mean in today's service economy or environment?
Oh, thank you. Hitachi Energy, traditionally a product company, we actually started our services business unit as a separate the business unit a year ago. So we just celebrated our the first anniversary. It's a strong service organization, but still shaped by the products company operating model, right? The service organized around the products more than the the customer's outcomes. And just like many service organization, as a cost line rather than a strategic growth engine, and we are on a journey to change that. So our field team has a very deep expertise in the high voltage, this highly specialized the power industry, but the commercial model did not always give a service a seat at the customer's strategic table. So I think the opportunity in front of our organization is to move from the pockets of this excellence to a scalable operating model that partners with the other customers. So when we say benchmark, I think just like you said, this is not something, a trophy. It is a continuous effort, and this is not a title that you can claim by yourself. And I think our customer sets that benchmark. And I believe you know you are the benchmark when the customers cannot describe their own operating model without describing the partner who helps them to run it. I believe that is the true definition of being a benchmark.
I love it. Those are great viewpoints, and I love the first point you made about the recognition and the importance of leadership in terms of steering the culture and transforming the culture. I keep talking about, are we making progress in terms of services recognition in my opening statements every year at our symposium. And, if you look at Wall Street, there's not much progress, right? C-suite executives overseeing service is still hovering around 10 to 15% of Fortune 100 companies. But when we look at best-in-class frameworks and those that are achieving best-in-class, the presence of leadership overseeing the services business is somewhere in the 67 to 75% range, right? So 3 out of 4. So I appreciate that Hitachi Energy has put you at the leadership position to take this organization forward, because they're in good hands. You've spoken about the funeral of run to failure and the shift toward becoming a digitally enabled lifecycle partner. What's driving that shift, and how does it fundamentally change the role service plays in the business and for the customer?
I think the customer's profile, the risk profile has changed. So from that perspective, I use that the term run to failure, the funeral. If I give an analogy, if you're driving a Honda Civic and we run to failure means, you wait for the light to change the oil and such too. When it comes to critical infrastructure, that really just powers the society and the industries, aging infrastructure, the workforce constraints, all this, the new coming load to our 40-year-old grid. The reliability expectations do not tolerate a reactive posture. And I do believe this is not just a service shift. It's the business model shift. Customers are moving from just buying equipment and emergency responses to buying an uptime, predictability, asset life, and risk reduction, because the redundancy that was built in this power industry has gone. Our lead times are 5, 6 years ahead. All our factories are spoken for. We just cannot keep up with the critical assets. The parts are not available as they used to be. And once again, that 40-year-old grid is taking on such a big load that the redundancy replace itself, being a very proactive lifecycle partnership. From that perspective, we are on a journey, and I think the journey has three legs to it. Just like many services organizations, John, the transactional service needs to become an outcome-based lifecycle partnership, and there's a mid layer, the second step, which is the managed services. And I think many of ours moving to stage 1 to stage 3, and most of us the hard work, we forget that it is in the middle, which is the managed services. This is also where the transformation takes place.
Absolutely. And I want to encourage our listening audience, if you're comfortable or want to get involved, to be our participating audience. We welcome you to comment and submit questions or reactions via the comment field. So thank you. When we were talking about the planning of this podcast, you and I were talking about how we've reframed the traditional framework of people, process, technology, and data around 5 Ps: philosophy or purpose, people, process, platform, where technology and data converge, and parts, right? In many, especially asset-centric industries, the importance of parts and not treating parts as a silo, but more integrated in service operations, is something that we've been advocating and building energy around.
Yep.
Why is the evolution necessary, and what gaps does it address in how organizations approach transformation?
Look, I'm a big fan of the 5P, because if you just look at the traditionally, the people, process, technologies, I control data, it's a great project diagnostic framework. But I do believe the 5Ps is stronger as a business architecture. And I always say the underlying, the first thing, non-negotiable piece of the 5P is the philosophy, which is really forcing ourselves to ask, why are we digitizing, what we are transforming into, what business we are actually becoming, right? From that perspective, I think the transformation skips usually the question is on risk. Are we a product company or does service, or we are a customer outcome company that uses the equipment, our services, and the digital as an instrumentation to become a lifecycle partner? From that perspective, we are going to dive into the 5Ps, but the platform and the parts portion makes the traditional 3P framework real. I think the platform connects intelligence, but at the end, the parts very integral to our services really determine whether our promises turns into uptime at the customer side. And that's almost, I always say, it's our 2 a.m. reality check when things really break down, that is 5P is at work or not.
Yeah, I love that you started with the philosophy and the purpose. We agree. Last year, we put our thoughts on paper around the culture philosophy that we've been building in market called Services Humanity, and it outlines all the different elements and pillars of creating a culture of care, and why is it important, and how do you sustain it, and all the good things related. Bob Feiner, my colleague, co-author, helped put this into a framework that was consumable. And when you look at all the leading companies in the world that are really doing well in their respective industries, they all have embraced a culture of care, and they've empowered their teams to exhibit care and not just focus on operational efficiencies and cost reduction and throughput and all the things that lead to employee burnout and all the other things, right? So I love you started there, and it starts with empowerment, right? So, and let's build on this philosophy element a little bit. So you talked about purpose and cultural transformation as the foundation. What does it look like when service is truly treated as that strategic business, not just a support function? And how do leaders actually embed that mindset in the organization?
No, thank you. First of all, the service is humanity. What a great work. So thank you very much for putting together. We are reading, we encourage our teams to read it. The whole care, and I think that is the pillar of the core pillar of the philosophy, right? And when I look at the services from where I sit, it is not a department. It is really the integration point where the business model transformation and the digital transformation meet the customers. I think if we do not see it that way, we will underinvest in both. So, and when the service becomes the P&L, it's not just a title, it's not just elevation in the hierarchy, which means that now the service actually have the power for the capital allocation. So it has its own leadership team and the having a seat at the executive table. So if the service only appears when something is broken, I think we are all missing one of the strongest source of our customer intelligence. And I do believe that we have this mindset and showcase where we spend the time as the company. And I always say the culture is the residue of the leadership attention, right? If the leaders really stay close to the service, the organization learns that customer outcomes and what that matters to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was really shocking through our research, we just completed analysis on the service leaders agenda. And my colleague Gerardo Pelayo commented on some of the shocking revelations from the data set this year. And what we saw that was revealed was that almost 50% year over year increase in the proportion of service leaders that didn't achieve their previous annual targets for customer experience and business experience, whether that be profit, margin, revenue, et cetera. But when we, with so many of the technological investments and initiatives that are aimed at removing friction, from the service process, it stood out that only 12% identified employee experience as the one where most progress is expected this year. So we continue to see employee experience be a little bit down the totem pole in terms of focus. Commonly, it's the number 4th priority among service leaders. And if you believe in the theory that customer experience is the overflow of employee experience and it will never be greater than employee experience, then we ought to change that, flip it on its head, right? And so I'd love to see employee experience come up the ladder. Let's get into people and process and the integration of people and process. Obviously the talent crisis continues, right? Both fueled by the retirement crisis, but also the engagement crisis. At the same time, processes are becoming more hybrid and human and digital together. How do you simultaneously solve for workforce challenges while redesigning processes that require both human expertise and augmentation, but also the digital augmentation and subordinating different tasks in service delivery that might not be human aided? How are you balancing that?
A great question. When we look at the talent, the scarcity of the talent, I think it's a problem in every sector. But I don't think the talent issue is not just the headcount and just the number of the folks. I think the work itself is changing. The world has changed, is becoming more digital, more integrated. So our current the field team right now, they find themselves in a place where they have to really understand the sensor data, diagnostics, the new softwares coming every day. I don't want to talk about the AI, but also AI, right? And of course, with in the midst of everything, they are also becoming understanding the customer's commercial judgment. What I mean is, when we say we are becoming a life cycle partner, that also shifts the dynamic to truly understand our customer's outcome, because that is when the whole shit really changes and we have our position to become a truly life cycle partner. So from that perspective, we are changing our the capability building. You will hear more Kirsey. We launched a service academy. We are looking at the cross training that our the services team are learning more about the digital tools, more about the finance, more about the customers' levers, on top of their already strong knowledge of as a subject matter expertise. So from
Outstanding.
that from that perspective, I think it is becoming a hybrid. I think for that reason, the process has to be redesigned around the customers, the mission critical moments, and what they are trying to achieve. And if we do that, that transformation, especially having the digital layer, that digital really improving our judgment and we say not replacing it. And I think service is a great place, because service is the relationship with the digital layer, right? Not the digital business with the human layer. From that perspective, that changes in the how the work itself is also changing how we are seeing our organization as reshaping.
You know what? There's a lot of interesting things that you made in terms of your points there on that journey you're on. But one of the things that stands out to me is the lack of congruence in terms of, leadership is driving for X, and frontline and workforce is driving for Y, when they should be driving for the same thing. So let me give you an example of that, right? So, leadership. One of the employee metrics that we've seen rise up the ladder in terms of importance is time to value. So how can we onboard quicker, get them to be independent and in the field, and to be part of your capacity planning model, a resource that you can use? Where perhaps we should be thinking about it differently. We all know that the pathway to becoming, expert level in service is somewhere between 18 to 24 months on that horizon, right? You go through apprentice and mid stage and later stage. And sometimes it takes years in complex service industries, asset industries, where, man, the knowledge saturation, learning all the abundance of asset knowledge that you need to have, that can take even longer. So time to value has become an important metric among service leaders, but really at the end of the day, it should be enjoyment of the team, right? Enjoyment of the process. Did they enjoy the onboarding experience, the training, the upskilling, reskilling, the day-to-day, right? Are we creating an enjoyment platform for employees? Because I think that overflow will hit the customer experience. So I'd love to see that mindset shift. And you kind of had many of those points in your talk track there. Let's get into the whole platform and parts side of the 5Ps story, where transformation really gets real, right? AI and everything going crazy right now. Transformation often breaks down at execution, especially when you think about disconnected systems, parts logistics being over here, disparate databases, that single source of truth, and the time suck of finding information that might be important in that moment of truth with the customer. So can I get your viewpoints on two things? So on platform, creating interoperability across data and technology. Why don't we start there, and I'll come back to you on the second part of the equation.
Let me start with the platform. Platforms are great. Platforms are also trap. Because I think the most companies, they confuse the platforming or the digital transformation as just buying a new fancy new platform or a software. But I think, as you mentioned, the real test is interoperability. Can these platforms read from anywhere and write to anywhere and improve how the decisions are made? on our customers too. Just to use an analogy, if you are in the weather business, and if we just have the latest and the greatest the platform that predicts the next the storm coming in 72 hours. And if our umbrellas are get stuck in somewhere in the basement and we don't know where to find this, that platform is only going to say, "Hey, it's going to rain. You need an umbrella," but umbrella is nowhere to be found too, right? So
Yeah.
I think for that reason, that the interconnectivity, also the platform and the resources deployed, the parts is the major one. This is when the uptime is won or lost, right? Again, a platform can predict 72 hours ahead, but if the part is 6 weeks away, customers will remember the day that we could not fix it or we couldn't bring the umbrella to the rain.
Yeah, yeah. You're totally right, and so how is that manifesting itself inside the organization? We're seeing missed triage and diagnosis, parts shotgunning, which erodes cost, or excuse me, inflates cost and erodes margin. But also ultimately it's creating an environment of missed SLA commitments, penalties, but also customer outcomes and customer success, right? Asset downtime and asset performance. And what is the cost of asset downtime? Have you done an analysis of, every hour of asset downtime impacts the customer Y, right? Have we looked at it like that? Because I think we'd be thinking differently. And the other thing I think you bring up, which is interesting, is if we trusted Doppler and Weatherman, we might find ourselves in tricky weather at times. So so you got to get the platform correct, and you've got to think about data serving as the informant, but also balancing that with the human side of things in terms of the engagement of the customer, and then trickling that down to the front line so that there's full transparency. So we keep on framing it out as, you got to think of transformation as human and technology, and humans moving forward are going to start growing symbiotically together with technology, right? And so that's how we've been looking at it from a research standpoint.
Augmentation, and I just can't agree more, John. And I think again, the parts miss everything. We talk about the culture. It's all about creating the trust cycle, right? I think that the small
Absolutely.
trust leads to a momentum. So we need to continue to build on trust with the customers if you wanted to be a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to so having a vision, but then moving it to execution. So some of the lessons learned and some of the things that you've applied to the business. So as you've gone through this journey, where are you finding some of those moments where you've maybe got some bruises, or on the other flip side of it, where are some of the things that you're like, wow, this really worked well, and I would definitely model and emulate against this? Could you share that with our audience?
I can. Look, I think as many of us in the services business, we walk around with many bruises. So the first one that comes to my mind, let me give maybe 2 examples. The first one that comes to my mind is the build versus buy. I'm an engineer. I work in many different industrial companies, and in our DNA, we are wired to build. Just because we built the product, why not the software? Why not everything around it, right? So, but I do believe that we do these digital mistakes coming from really undervaluing the partnership. So I think we have to be very honest. We have to be very clear about ourselves, what we must own, then the partners. And when we realize this is where we should partner, we should really partner aggressively for everything else that is outside of our domain. You do not want to be a mediocre software company. You want it to be a great service company that partners with a great software company and such too. And the other thing is, what are we digitizing or what are we transforming? So I think I learned throughout my the career that do not lead with the org chart. Lead with the outcome, lead with the customers, understand what is changing, and lead with that mission and let the people choose to belong to it. And I think when the structural changes become, I always believe that the changes becomes easier when the purpose is clear and what we are trying to become, strategy before structure, right? So instead of just digitizing a wrong department, a wrong the work orders, processes, I think we should just really just stay back and understanding what is changing, what needs to be transformed, and how can we align ourselves to be able to surf that change.
I love it. I love those viewpoints. You've got to start with a capability lens. First of all, you got to start with what are we solving for, right? You got to work from the customer backwards, and then you've got to train your eye on the capability layer. Like what are, before we start to evaluate systems, we've got to map out what business capabilities, what impact that's making, what are the outcomes that are being achieved. And then you can use this survive, transform, and replace methodology in terms of, do we modernize? Are our legacy systems built for scale? Are they built for AI? Are we going to drive ourselves nuts because they just can't scale, right? And we can't API, and we're going to create a Frankenstein approach and have a disparate, in the opposite of interoperable framework, right? What are we doing? Are we wasting energy? Are we wasting effort and an investment? So I appreciate the viewpoints there, and I think they line up really well with what we're framing back to our community. So Emrah, this has been a great conversation, and it's always good to leave our audience, our listening audience, with something about you outside of work. So on a personal note, what's something outside of work that keeps you grounded or energized as you lead through life outside of service?
I mean, other than my kids and chasing them, I surf, and I think
Awesome.
the surfing has taught me a lot about the transformation. I'm from Turkey. When I first moved to California, it just became my calling. So, and you learn a lot of things about the surfing. And I think we talk about sustaining the energy, and I think you find out when you surf. I think the best surfers are not always the strongest ones, right? They are the ones that who really read the ocean better than anybody else. And I think, to me, that is where the when we are transforming, changing, just understanding our circumstances, where we are in the lineup of the ocean is behaving. So that is, to me, a huge the learning. And of course, the surfing is all about timing, patience, and commitment. So, which
Yeah.
means that you need to let some wave go, because if you cannot leave one wave, you will never be in a position for the next one. So I think that also requires us just to reflect, continues to ask ourselves, how are the macroeconomics changing? How are our customers changing? And what can we do? And not just being very reactive, and having that patience, having that the timing. Surfing is a lot of teachings, but I
Yeah.
think this is the one that taught me about the transformation, resilience, and sustaining our energy.
Yeah, my kids are into the surfing too during summer vacation. I try to get out there, but my goodness, I've got a lot of work to do there. So I'll catch the next wave. But listen, he's Emrah Ercan, right? Am I pronouncing it correctly now?
Yes, you
Because
are. Yes, you are.
I
Yes,
use the
yes,
American way of pronouncing your name. So
yes,
my
yes. No, it's
apologies,
close.
Emrah.
It's close. I take
Uh,
it.
so he's the vice president of service for North America for Hitachi Energy. He's a board member of the Service Council, and he's made so many impacts in sharing and imparting his wisdom on our community, including today's podcast. Emrah, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for enriching our community, and we'll see you on the next episode. And thank you for joining today's In Service podcast. We'll see you next time. Appreciate
Thank you
you.
for having me. Thank you.